Moving into Maplewood Estates felt like stepping into a dream. The house was perfect, spacious, bright, and nestled in a neighborhood that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Mark and I had spent months searching for the right place, and finally, we'd found it. As the movers unloaded our belongings, I wandered through the empty rooms, imagining how we'd fill them with life, laughter, and memories. It was overwhelming but exciting, like opening a new chapter of our lives. But then, reality crept in. On the kitchen counter sat an envelope with bold black letters. "Welcome to Maplewood Estates. Homeowners Association Guidelines." My heart sank just a little. I picked it up, expecting a cheerful note or maybe a list of community events. Instead, I found myself staring at pages of rules. So many rules. No parking on the street after 8 p.m. Holiday decorations had to come down within 2 weeks. Lawn maintenance was mandatory every Friday morning. Even the color of our mailbox was regulated. At first, I laughed nervously. Seriously, rules about mailboxes? Who cared about stuff like that? But as I kept reading, a strange feeling began to creep over me. The tone of the letter wasn't friendly or welcoming. It was strict, almost intimidating. Phrases like "failure to comply will result in fines" jumped out at me. Who talked like that in a neighborhood? This wasn't just a set of guidelines. It felt more like a warning. Mark came downstairs, sweaty and tired from hauling boxes. He noticed the envelope in my hand and smirked. "What's that?" "Some kind of secret code for living here." I handed it to him, raising an eyebrow. "You tell me." He skimmed through the pages, his grin fading. "Wow, they're really particular, huh?" "Particular? This is insane," I said, pacing the room. "It's like they want to control everything." Mark shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. "Relax, it's probably just bureaucracy. People make big deals out of nothing. You'll see, it's all bark, no bite." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. Something about those rules didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way they were written, cold and impersonal, or maybe it was the nagging thought that this neighborhood might not be as picture-perfect as it seemed. Either way, I couldn't shake the feeling that moving here wasn't going to be as simple as unpacking boxes and planting flowers. Later that night, after the movers were gone and the house was quiet, I stood by the window, looking out at the cul-de-sac. Everything looked pristine. The neatly trimmed lawns, the matching houses, the lampposts glowing softly under the evening sky. It was beautiful, yes, but also eerily uniform. There was something unsettling about how identical everything appeared, like a movie set designed to look perfect but lacking soul. As I sipped my tea, I wondered if anyone else felt the same way. Did the neighbors think these rules were ridiculous too, or had they embraced them wholeheartedly? And what happened if someone broke the rules? Fines? Arguments? Worse? For the first time since signing the lease, doubt crept into my mind. Was this really the fresh start we hoped for? Or was Maplewood Estates hiding secrets behind its polished facade? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain. I wasn't ready to let go of my freedom without a fight. The next morning, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. After all, exploring seemed like the best way to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest after reading the HOA guidelines. The air was crisp, and the sun cast a golden glow over the cul-de-sac. Everything looked perfect, almost too perfect. The lawns were so green they could have been painted. The flower beds matched like they'd been planned by a professional designer, and not a single car was parked on the street. It felt less like a neighborhood and more like a showroom for suburban living. As I strolled down the sidewalk, I noticed Mrs. Harper standing outside her house, pruning a row of rose bushes with surgical precision. She looked up when she saw me approach, her lips curling into what might have been a smile, or maybe just a polite grimace. "Morning," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "Good morning," I replied, stopping near her driveway. "Beautiful flowers you've got here." She nodded briskly, as if accepting a compliment she already knew was true. Then, without missing a beat, she added, Just make sure your recycling bins are out of sight on collection days. We're very particular about keeping things tidy around here." I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift from small talk to rule enforcement. "Oh, okay. Thanks for letting me know." Mrs. Harper gave me another tight-lipped nod before returning to her roses, clearly signaling that our conversation was over. I walked away, feeling a mix of amusement and discomfort. Was this how it worked here? Conversations always circling back to rules. Over the next few days, I made an effort to meet more of the neighbors. They were polite enough, but there was something odd about their behavior. Everyone waved hello, exchanged pleasantries, and then quickly retreated behind closed doors. It was like they were playing a part, sticking to some unspoken script. No one lingered for long chats or invited me inside for coffee. Instead, they seemed to be watching, not in a creepy way, but in a way that made me feel like I was being evaluated. One evening, as Mark watered the front yard, Gloria Whitman herself appeared. She was dressed in a pastel blazer and carried a clipboard, which she tapped rhythmically against her palm. Her presence commanded attention, and Mark immediately straightened up, sensing her authority. "Lovely job keeping up with the landscaping," she said, her voice smooth but firm. But then her eyes flicked toward the mailbox, a subtle gesture, yet unmistakably critical. Though I did notice a stray weed near the base. Best to address that soon. Mark forced a smile, though his grip on the hose tightened slightly. "Sure thing. Thanks for letting us know." After she left, he turned to me, shaking his head. "Did you catch that? A stray weed? Seriously?" I laughed nervously, but the truth was, I had noticed it too. Their asterisk was asterisk, a tiny dandelion sprouting near the mailbox. It hadn't bothered me until now, but suddenly it felt glaringly obvious, like a neon sign broadcasting our failure to conform. What worried me most wasn't the criticism. It was the way the neighbors treated us afterward. Conversation stopped when we approached. People crossed the street to avoid eye contact. It was like we'd been marked as outsiders simply because Gloria had pointed out one little flaw. That night, unable to sleep, I scrolled through Facebook while lying in bed. A private group popped up in my feed. Maplewood Watchdogs. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on it. Dozens of posts filled the page, each one detailing alleged infractions committed by residents. Someone had even taken a picture of our front yard, captioned, "Asterisk still waiting for those weeds to disappear." Asterisk. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about maintaining property values or following guidelines. It was personal. These people weren't just neighbors. They were enforcers, ready to pounce at the slightest misstep. And somehow, we'd become their latest target. It started with a small white slip of paper taped to our front door. The note was neatly typed, just like the HOA guidelines I'd read when we first moved in. It read, asterisk, "Dear residents, please ensure your garbage cans are stored out of sight at all times. Failure to comply may result in a $50 fine." Asterisk. I stared at it for a long moment, my hands gripping the edge of the counter as frustration bubbled inside me. Out of sight. Where exactly were we supposed to put them? We didn't have a garage. We'd converted it into a storage space since we hadn't finished unpacking yet. Hiding the bins behind the bushes felt impractical and ridiculous. Still, I sighed and dragged the cans to the side of the house, tucking them awkwardly behind a cluster of shrubs. If this was what it took to keep the peace, so be it. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, another note appeared. This time, it accused us of leaving a porch light on past midnight, claiming it violated energy conservation guidelines. Then came a third one, citing Mark for wearing flip-flops while mowing the lawn. Flip-flops. Apparently, improper footwear poses safety risks. Each note carried the same signature at the bottom. Asterisk, Gloria Whitman, HOA President. Asterisk. Her name began to feel like a brand burned into my mind. Every time I saw it, my blood pressure rose a little higher. I tried calling the HOA office to ask questions, hoping to find some clarity, or at least a hint of flexibility. But every call ended the same way. They redirected me to Gloria. When I finally reached her, her voice was calm, almost soothing, but there was an unyielding edge beneath her words. "These rules exist for the good of the community," she explained patiently. "Surely you understand." Understand? How could I possibly understand? None of this made sense. Who cared about flip-flops or porch lights? It felt less like maintaining order and more like micromanaging our lives. What bothered me most wasn't the fines. It was how the neighbors began treating us. Conversations stopped when we approached. People avoided eye contact altogether. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but soon it became impossible to ignore. It was like we'd been branded troublemakers without even realizing it. One evening, unable to shake the growing tension, I sat on the couch scrolling through social media. That's when I stumbled across a private Facebook group called Maplewood Watchdogs. My stomach sank as I clicked on it. Dozens of posts detailed alleged infractions committed by residents, complete with photos and snarky comments. One photo showed our front yard, zoomed in on the tiny dandelion near the mailbox. The caption read, "Still waiting for those weeds to disappear." My heart raced as I scrolled further. Someone had posted a picture of a neighbor's car parked on their driveway overnight instead of inside the garage. Another complained about holiday decorations left up for 3 weeks instead of 2. Each post was laced with judgmental remarks, turning minor oversights into major offenses. I showed the page to Mark, who groaned loudly. "Are you kidding me? These people have nothing better to do than spy on each other." "It's not just spying," I said, my voice trembling. "It's like they're trying to control us." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of everything pressed down on me. The notes, the stares, the whispers. What had started as harmless rules now felt suffocating, like invisible chains tightening around us. For the first time since moving in, I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake choosing Maplewood Estates. Had we walked into a trap disguised as paradise? And then, amidst the frustration and fear, a spark ignited within me. If they wanted compliance, fine, but I refused to let them crush our spirit. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't back down without a fight. Things reached a breaking point one Saturday morning when Mark received yet another letter from the HOA. This time, it was formal. A typewritten document with an official stamp at the top. The accusation: his car had been parked on the driveway overnight instead of inside the garage. Never mind that our garage was still packed to the brim with moving boxes and furniture we hadn't gotten around to organizing yet. To the HOA, none of that mattered. "This is insane." Mark exploded, slamming the letter onto the kitchen table. "They can't control every single thing we do." "They already are," I muttered under my breath, tears welling up in my eyes. The frustration had been building for weeks, and now it felt like a dam ready to burst. Every note, every glare, every whispered comment from the neighbors. It all came rushing back at once. We weren't just dealing with rules anymore. We were drowning in them. Desperate for answers, or maybe just desperate to vent, I decided to visit Gloria Whitman at the HOA office the next day. The building was small but immaculate, tucked away in a corner of the neighborhood. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged. Files stacked neatly, chairs aligned symmetrically, and not a speck of dust in sight. Gloria sat behind her desk, typing something on her computer as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up, her voice calm and measured. "I wanted to talk about these guidelines," I said, placing the stack of notes we'd received on her desk. She glanced at them briefly before turning her attention back to me. "Yes. What about them?" "Well, they seem excessive," I began hesitantly. "Some of these things, like the porch light or the flip-flops, they don't make sense. They feel unnecessary." Gloria leaned back in her chair, folding her hands together. Her expression didn't change, but there was something cold in her gaze. Order breeds harmony, she said firmly. Without structure, communities crumble. Surely you've noticed how peaceful it is here compared to other neighborhoods. Her words hit me like a wall. Peaceful. Sure, the streets were quiet, the lawns pristine. But at what cost? Was this really peace, or just fear disguised as order? I wanted to argue, to tell her how suffocating it felt to live under constant scrutiny, but something stopped me. For the first time, I noticed the framed photo behind her desk. It showed a younger version of Gloria standing beside an older man who bore a striking resemblance to her. Beneath the picture was a nameplate. Asterisk founder of Maplewood Estates Asterisk. Suddenly, it clicked. This wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was personal for Gloria. She wasn't just protecting a neighborhood. She was preserving a legacy. The weight of that realization silenced me. As I left the office, I realized something else. I couldn't let her win. That night, I called Mark into the living room. "We need to push back," I said firmly. He looked at me, surprised but intrigued. "I'm serious. If we keep letting them dictate every little thing, we'll lose ourselves completely." Mark hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but how?" "We start small," I replied, a plan forming in my mind. Something symbolic, something they won't expect. The idea came to me almost instantly. The mailbox. According to the HOA handbook, mailboxes were required to be white. No exceptions, so naturally, the next morning, I painted ours bright red. Mark watched nervously as I worked, shaking his head. "Are you trying to get us evicted?" "No," I shot back, brushing a streak of scarlet paint onto the metal surface. "I'm reminding everyone, including us, that this is our asterisk house, not theirs." By noon, word had spread. Neighbors slowed their cars as they passed, craning their necks to get a better look. Mrs. Harper appeared at her gate, frowning disapprovingly. Even Gloria herself drove by, her face unreadable behind dark sunglasses. But the strangest part, nothing happened. No fines arrived in the mail. No angry letters taped to our door. Just silence, and plenty of stares. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we weren't as powerless as we thought. The red mailbox became the talk of the neighborhood overnight. It wasn't just a splash of color. It was a statement, a quiet rebellion against the suffocating rules that had been pressing down on us since we moved in. But as much as it felt empowering to take a stand, I couldn't ignore the tension simmering beneath the surface. The stares from neighbors grew colder, the whispers louder. And then came the second note. This time, it wasn't taped to our door. It arrived in the mail, printed on official HOA letterhead. Asterisk, dear residents, your recent modification to the mailbox violates Section 3.2 of the Maplewood Estates Guidelines. Failure to rectify this issue within 48 hours will result in a $100 fine and possible legal action. Asterisk. I read the letter aloud to Mark, my voice trembling with anger. Legal action. For painting a mailbox. Mark clenched his fists but forced a smile. They're bluffing. Let's see what they do. But Gloria wasn't bluffing. 2 days later, another envelope appeared, this one heavier, more ominous. Inside was a formal warning. If the mailbox wasn't repainted white by the end of the week, the HOA would hire someone to do it themselves and charge us for the cost. That's when things escalated. One evening, as I watered the plants near the driveway, I noticed something odd about the mailbox. Someone had scratched deep lines across its surface, marring the bright red paint. It wasn't vandalism. It was calculated, a message meant to intimidate. My hands shook as I ran my fingers over the scratches. Who would do this? Mrs. Harper? One of the other neighbors? Or had Gloria herself crossed the line from rule enforcer to outright bully? Mark found me standing there, staring at the damaged mailbox. His jaw tightened when he saw it. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "They've gone too far. We can't let them win," I said firmly, though my voice wavered. If anything, this proves we're doing something right. That night, we went to the hardware store and bought fresh paint. By morning, the mailbox was redder than ever, shining like a beacon of defiance in the sunlight. Word spread quickly. Neighbors slowed their cars to gawk, some shaking their heads, others smirking. Even kids on bikes stopped to point and laugh. Then, something unexpected happened. A few days later, I noticed something strange while walking the dog. Across the street, Mrs. Patel's mailbox, which had always been plain white, now sported a bright yellow stripe. Down the block, Mr. Thompson had painted his blue. By the end of the week, nearly half the mailboxes on our street were sporting colors that broke the rules. It started small, almost playful. A streak here, a splash there, but it sent a clear message. We weren't alone. Others were tired of living under Gloria's iron grip too. Gloria responded predictably. Letters poured into every home with colorful mailboxes, each one threatening fines and penalties. But instead of cowering, people pushed back. Some ignored the warnings entirely. Others wrote polite but firm replies, questioning the fairness of the rules. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Harper outside her house. She looked flustered, holding a crumpled HOA notice in her hand. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered, glancing at my mailbox before looking away quickly. "It doesn't have to be this way," I said softly. "We could work together. Change the rules instead of letting them control us." She hesitated, then nodded slightly before heading inside. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the rebellion grew, so did the tension. Gloria called emergency meetings, her voice sharp and accusatory. She accused us of undermining the sanctity of the neighborhood, of turning Maplewood Estates into chaos. But the cracks in her authority were showing. People were talking, questioning, and slowly they were beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to live in fear anymore. The tension in Maplewood Estates reached a boiling point when Gloria called an emergency meeting. Attendance was mandatory, and the community center buzzed with nervous energy as neighbors filed in, whispering among themselves. The air felt heavy, like a storm about to break. Mark and I arrived early, taking seats near the back. I scanned the room, noticing the mix of emotions on people's faces: fear, frustration, defiance, and even a hint of excitement. When Gloria stepped onto the stage, the murmurs died instantly. She looked every bit the part of authority. Her pastel blazer was crisp, her clipboard clutched tightly in one hand. Her eyes swept over the crowd, lingering just a fraction too long on me before she began to speak. Recent events have shown a disturbing lack of respect for the principles upon which this community was built, she said, her voice sharp and unwavering. If these transgressions continue, drastic measures will be necessary. Drastic measures. What did that even mean? My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about mailboxes anymore. It was about control. And Gloria wasn't going to let go without a fight. Before anyone could respond, a man stood up near the back of the room. It was Mr. Patel, who rarely spoke at meetings and always seemed content to blend into the background. But today, he looked determined, his shoulders squared as he addressed Gloria. "With all due respect, Gloria," he began, his voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word, "maybe the rules need to change. This isn't a prison. It's supposed to be a home." A murmur rippled through the crowd, followed by hesitant applause. Heads nodded in agreement, emboldened by Mr. Patel's courage. One by one, others started speaking up. Mrs. Harper, usually so quick to enforce the rules, surprised everyone by raising her hand. "I agree," she said quietly, though her words carried weight. "These guidelines, they're too strict. They make us feel like we're walking on eggshells all the time." Even Mrs. Thompson chimed in, her voice firm. "We moved here for peace, not to live under constant surveillance. Something has to give." Gloria's composure cracked for the first time. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her knuckles turned white as she gripped the podium. She tried to regain control, pointing out how the rules ensured property values stayed high and the neighborhood remained orderly. But her arguments fell flat. People weren't listening anymore. They were united. As the meeting dragged on, it became clear that the tide had shifted. Neighbors exchanged knowing glances, their shared frustration turning into solidarity. For once, the whispers weren't about gossip or complaints. They were about hope. By the time the meeting ended, the atmosphere had transformed. Instead of slinking away silently, people lingered, chatting animatedly about what came next. Someone suggested forming a committee to review and revise the HOA guidelines. Others offered to help organize petitions or host discussions. The rebellion that had started with a single red mailbox had grown into something much bigger. Walking home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Gloria wouldn't step down without a fight. But for the first time, I believed real change was possible. Maplewood Estates wasn't perfect, and maybe it never would be. But it was ours, not hers. And together, we were ready to take it back. Weeks passed, and slowly things began to change in Maplewood Estates. The rebellion that had started with a red mailbox grew into something no one could have predicted, not even me. Gloria Whitman resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew it was more than that. Her iron grip on the neighborhood had loosened, and she couldn't hold on any longer. She still lived in her perfectly manicured house at the end of the cul-de-sac, but she kept to herself now, rarely seen outside except for the occasional walk with her clipboard tucked under her arm. In her place, the board elected Lisa Nguyen, a soft-spoken woman who radiated warmth and common sense. Lisa promised transparency, flexibility, and, most importantly, a focus on community over control. Her first order of business, forming a committee to review the HOA guidelines. Dozens of neighbors volunteered to help, eager to rewrite the rules that had once felt suffocating. Meetings were held in backyards instead of sterile conference rooms, laughter replacing tension as people worked together toward compromise. The changes came gradually but meaningfully. Mailboxes stayed colorful, their vibrant hues adding personality to the streets. Sunflowers bloomed along fences where once only uniformed shrubs had been allowed. Holiday decorations lingered past the 2-week deadline, twinkling merrily in defiance of old restrictions. Even Mrs. Harper left her recycling bin out overnight without batting an eye. One evening, Mark and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Our red mailbox stood proudly at the edge of the driveway, its scratches long since covered by fresh coats of paint. It wasn't just a symbol of rebellion anymore. It was a reminder of what we accomplished together. "You know," Mark said, sipping his coffee, "I never thought I'd say this, but I actually like it here now." "Really?" I teased, raising an eyebrow. "Even after everything?" He chuckled. "Yeah. Weird, right? But look at it. People talk to each other now. They laugh. It feels real." I nodded, glancing around at the neighborhood. Kids played basketball in driveways while parents chatted nearby. Someone had set up a lemonade stand at the corner, free cups available for anyone passing by. The air buzzed with life, not fear. Lisa's leadership made all the difference. She didn't try to erase the past or pretend the issues hadn't existed. Instead, she acknowledged them and worked to build trust. Monthly block parties became a tradition, giving neighbors a chance to connect outside the shadow of rules and regulations. For the first time, I felt like we truly belonged here. Of course, not everything changed overnight. Some neighbors clung to the old ways, grumbling about slippery slopes and setting bad precedents. But even they softened eventually, swayed by the undeniable shift in energy. Gloria remained distant, but even she seemed less imposing now, her presence fading into the background like a storm cloud drifting away. As I looked out at our little corner of the world, I realized something important. Perfection isn't what makes a home. It's the imperfections, the quirks, the struggles, the shared victories that create something worth fighting for. We'd fought hard for Maplewood Estates, and in doing so, we'd transformed it into something far better than its polished facade had ever promised. Later that night, as Mark and I cleaned up dinner dishes, he grinned at me. "So, do you think we'll stay a while?" I smiled back, thinking of the red mailbox and the colorful chaos beyond it. "Yeah, I think we will." And for the first time since moving in, I meant it wholeheartedly.